All right, cool. Nlyte and CMDB. So it's Nlyte and CMDB, and that can be any type of CMDB. So I'm not going to be brand specific. I'm not going to talk about BMC, HP, or whatever. I'm just talking about Nlyte and a CMDB. We're going to go through some questions around more the why. So I've got the hows, so I can talk a little bit about how at the end, but the most important thing for me to get across today is the how. So the hows I want to talk to is I've written down some questions. I'm going to go through these questions. These will be common things that you're going to see in the field and common questions that you're going to come up against. But I've kind of got a number of questions to go through. So the main purpose is, what's the purpose of a CMDB? Why did they spend a load of money on a CMDB and spend all the time trying to implement it? And I say trying because typically you'll get to an organization, they're either still trying to implement a CMDB or they've failed to implement a CMDB and they're transitioning to another CMDB by another vendor. So CMDB, so what is it? It's a central management or central information database. It's where all the information comes, configuration management database. That's where they collect their information around their assets. It stores and has been designed to populate itself with what they call configuration items. These configuration items can be servers, network devices, or whatever, and its typical population of how information gets into it is through discovery. So it'll go on the network, find what's on the network from a logical point of view, and it builds this logical map of records. So I've got these configuration items, and it will say, okay, for an example would be, I have this server chassis, and inside this chassis I have some blades. And it will say I've got some sub-servers. And that's about as far as it will go, and it will give you the logical information on them. It might say like number of memory, number of disks, this, that, and the other. But it gives you that logical view of your architecture. And that's pretty much how they're populated today, which is around a discovery piece. On top of that, there's other systems that tie into it, but I'm not going to talk about those. But there's processes where they collect information manually, they'll go around, get information, and they'll try and keep that system up to date with the exact configuration items they have inside their environment. From that, and the goal for this is obviously one, gives them one central place to find out exactly what they've got, but off of this as well, they can tie into other tools that can reach in to do change management, warranties, maintenance, and all of that, but I'm not going to talk about that today. I'm just talking about CMDB. So that's, what is the purpose of a CMDB and how are they done? Really, some of the pieces around CMDB, if we look at that, their area of weakness is their only way of source of putting the information in is around discovery and around collections or process for information. They don't store things like Nlyte would. They store a kind of flat list, if you like, or a nested list that basically explains these are the CIs I have and these are their relationships. It won't go into details such as in the CMDB you'd say this CI, this server is housed or related to this chassis. It won't say like in Nlyte, which would say this blade sits at this slot position within inside this chassis at this U position that is connected to these networks and connected to this power. So Nlyte gives you a very connected and relationship view from the resources and the capacity that it's taking, because it's very capacity management focused. It's around dealing with what have I got, what am I using, where CMDB is more about what have I got, and that's it, what have I got, and kind of how does it relate, not what is it using and where does it tie into. So that's one of the things, why bother with linking a CMDB to Nlyte? Because Nlyte extends a CMDB down into the data center and down into capacity management at that level. So what it says is you have these CIs, which represent these assets inside Nlyte, that mean they are sitting in these U positions, they are networked to these network ports, they are powered to these power ports, they are consuming these U slots, and they are actually these devices that are using this D-rated value. So all of the benefits of Nlyte, all of the capacity benefits, that's what you get from, that's why you tie it together. So you could say to yourself, well, why bother with that? Well, the reason why you need to bother with that is because Nlyte takes it right down into the rack. Nlyte actually shows you how things are, where they exist within inside the data center, visually. It gives you the pictures of the racks, gives you pictures of the devices, gives you pictures of the floor plans, and builds up that visual view. So it adds capacity and visualization to the CMDB. So the CMDB gives you a very flat listed view. You have this that's associated to this, very not detailed, not picture-wise. Can't be used as a detailed installation instruction. Whereas Nlyte's assets can pull from a CMDB, take the configuration item, create the related asset, and show you exactly where that's going to be installed and exactly how it fits in with the rest of your infrastructure. So that's the benefit, the why bother piece. And if you take that the other way around, so that's CMDB down, and you take it from Nlyte up, because Nlyte shows you the what if, the exact positions of everything, and you've got the detailed instructions, because someone uses those instructions to install a box and put a box into a rack, that's correct. It's going to be correct because someone's following it as an example, as an instruction. They've picked up a box because they see it on a picture, they've plugged it in and they've seen it in a picture that tells them exactly how to do it, and they've done it. When that passes up to the CMDB or verifies against the CMDB, that CI that's inside the CMDB is now true. It's a true representation of exactly what's in the real world. So now the CMDB is correct. So, you know, why is it important to get the CMDB correct? Well, from a compliancy point of view, from a what have I got, how much have I got, who last touched it, from a CMDB point of view, you now know that the CIs inside the CMDB are correct because we've got this process of instruction validation going into the CMDB. So that's now correct. We know that if I look from the CMDB and I looked for the related assets inside Nlyte, I know exactly where it is, I know who's changed information about it, I know who moved it and everything else. So from a compliance, if I want to look down and see, well, who touched this application, who's made changes to this application in relation to the boxes and everything, I could go a track all the way down into the rack. So that's one of the big key benefits there from a compliancy point of view. So I'm just going to have a quick answer these questions. Pause. Cool. So CMDB, so we're back, you know, the why. So there's the why there, there's the compliancy why. This is a very simple why, which does get overlooked when you start looking at the compliance and you start looking at the relationships. The very simple why connect your asset library or what's going on inside your environment to your CMDB and have it through a connector rather than someone doing an export or trying to type it in and everything else, is because the information's kept correct. So that means as something is added into the CMDB, through the Nlyte connector, you can have that new CI create a new asset inside Nlyte, which now means Nlyte is showing an asset that may need to be placed, that may need to be going into a room, or may need to be going into an environment. So you've removed the need for people to double type. You're using the machine, the process, to pass CI data, create an asset, and then enable someone to place it. So that's down from CMDB. If you do that the other way around, someone places something inside a rack, someone moves something inside a data center. Maybe we do a consolidation, maybe we do a migration or whatever, and we move some assets inside the Nlyte side. That change, what we've just done, will be passed up, represented within the CIs, within the CMDB, and the CMDB will now show a correct representation of the real world. So that's the why, on a real, why bother around that? So you've got the compliancy of data, single automated mechanism, so you've removed the need for people to double entry and type information in. The other thing as well is you're validating, you're making sure that CMDB is correct. So that's all of the why on that part of data. So now let's go on to the extension. What does it extend a CMDB to do? A CMDB does not have the ability, or is not designed really, to have the ability to do what if and planning. CMDB is what do I have, what do I own? What's the logical on top of these CIs? So by connecting Nlyte with a CMDB can now be extended into a what if model and then a planning model. So now you can say, I have these CIs, CI say asset server 1, or CI1, sorry, and it creates asset server 1 inside Nlyte. In Nlyte, I can plan, I can say, right, I want to take this, do a planned move or a what if, and say, well, I want to see what it would look like in this room. What would be the impact? I'd like to see where this can go. I can do all of that. The CMDB has no idea this is going on. So I can use Nlyte as a capacity management and a risk mitigation tool around putting things in and planning changes. When I've completed those changes and I've gone from plan to active, the CI will be updated with the location. So the bonus and the benefit you get from this is you've now turned a flat line, static, if you like, CMDB, single records of CIs, into a joint planning record. So you can now start doing your planning and your what-if stuff. So that really does give you the benefits around linking the two together. The other thing as well that you can get by linking Nlyte to a CMDB from a planning perspective is in Nlyte you can plan everything you're going to get. So you could build a whole room out. Say I'm fitting out in a whole new environment, or we're moving from, say, this data center to this data center. I can plan all those moves in Nlyte. CMDB doesn't need to know. I can lay them all out, put all the racks in, put all the servers in and everything else, and I can pass that back when they complete, when they actually start happening. So as server 1 moves from this data center to this data center and the plan completes, CMDB just knows this location has changed to this location, which means Nlyte can deal with the instructions, the detail telling you how to do it. CMDB can be updated on the what has actually happened. It doesn't need to worry about that sort of stuff. We can deal with all of that. The other thing as well is on the why do it is because CMDB won't tell you things like this CI has a dependency on this other CI for power, and its dependency is through this port and it is connected via this way, or it's physically sitting in this location with these constraints. That's where Nlyte takes in, and I guess this kind of brings us to the where does CMDB end and where does Nlyte begin? And it's really around that piece. It's the CMDB will deal with everything around the configuration items I have and how they relate at a logical point of view. You know, this logically relates to that. And Nlyte will deal with these assets are in these locations consuming this power, this space, this everything else, and are physically connected through this port, that port, whatever, all in the detail right the way through from an active point of view, and then from a planning point of view, this is what I'm going to do with this asset. So it really gives you that benefit. That's the why bother. Okay, so let's just have a look at a couple of these other ones. So I've covered that. So another benefit of the CMDB and the Nlyte connector is, so as I was saying earlier, CMDBs typically, right, are a failing project because they're so big, because there's so much information to be had to put in them. And like I said, their initial population has been through discovery. Discovery goes on the network, finds some assets, those assets are created as CIs, or records in created CIs. The issue with that is, and the downside of that is, not all discovery tools can see all things. So it's not network enabled, it's behind a firewall, I don't have the right credentials to get on the boxes yet, I don't understand, you know, what the network is I'm talking to, so my CMDB is only partially populated. What happens there is they go down a project to try to find this out and try different discovery protocols, blah blah blah, and then eventually people give up, the project's too hard, CMDB fails, you spent all this money, don't want egg on their face, so they move on and then they get another CMDB. So this process of population always causes a pain, and that's why you'll go into many customers and they'll say, we are implementing a CMDB, or we've built our own CMDB, or we're trying to move off of our own CMDB into a standard CMDB. By connecting Nlyte to a CMDB, you can use Nlyte in your normal process, you know how we do it today, when we go out, we do the load, we build the rooms, we set up the environments, put the assets in, and we take the customer's data, we cleanse that data, and we load up a true representation of the environment. Well, you can take that true representation of an environment and use it for the base population of the CMDB. And it would automatically go in, create all the CIs, put all the CIs in the sub-locations from Nlyte, and actually map that out. So it will get your CMDB populated very quickly. Now CMDBs, and I'm kind of stood in front of this, but CMDBs have typically this discovery connection. If you populate the CMDB from the base population with the assets from inside Nlyte to create the CIs within inside the CMDB now has an exact representation of what Nlyte sees. If you enrich this with the logical data from discovery and use the internal reconciliation parts of CMDB, it will make sure that these configuration items match what the network can see. So you may get 80% coming from Nlyte, right? Or 100% coming from Nlyte, sorry, of what we've got in the environment, and you may end up with your 80% or 50% being found logical, but the ones that have been found logical by this discovery tool are reconciled and correct in here. So you're building on top of those records. What you'll also get is, because these assets will be potentially, say, a DL3 AET sitting in this rack, sitting in this position of this type, we can pass that over to the CMDB. Now CMDB actually knows the types of devices. From here, when I take the logical information, I can enrich that record with things like, you know, this is its CPU, its memory, and all the details, the licensing, everything that I can find discovery-wise, I can start building on that CI. So this really does help with populating the CMDB and getting it off the ground. Now, if you go into a customer and they've already got a CMDB, the connector and the way that it integrates with Nlyte as well really does help in, one, enriching that model and making sure it's correct, like we've said, but it also enables you to take this CI model into this ASIC model and then tie the other related processes around Nlyte to make sure that the data center side is correct, and then with the connector you can keep the two in sync. All right, cool. So data accuracy. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what's inside the two systems. So like I've already said, inside a CMDB you've got what's called a configuration item. Now, configuration items is a very flexible record, and what that enables them to do, or what they store, is they can store things like a manufacturer and a model, right? They can store lots of logical information around that particular device, or whatever it is, and they can say that this CI is related to this CI, a very loose kind of dynamic relationship. Now, coming back to that, in here, inside the CMDB, they'll say this is a DL380, right? With inside Nlyte, we have a material which is a DL380, which has a detailed picture of exactly what it is, right? You know, how it is, its U positions, its capacity that it takes, the amount it weighs, its overall heat and everything else, right? So we store that inside Nlyte. So that means they're giving you, within the CI, you'll just get a manufacturer and a model. Within that, we extend that out to be more of a detailed, what does that actually mean? What's the capacity it actually takes? So from in here, you can do capacity management from how many things have I got of type X, it's DL380. In here, you can do capacity management of how many things have I got, DL380, but what are those things doing? You know, what space are they taking? What weight are they causing? What heat are they generating? What power are they using? What are they connected to? So you kind of get into, you're extending the CI with a very high level list into a very detailed capacity management list. So when you get into a debate or a conversation around capacity management, this can tell you how many things you have, how many things are nested or related to each other, at a high level and a logical point of view, just like a kind of what is it, where is it kind of thing. Well, it won't even tell you where, it'll tell you the locations, but it won't tell you exactly where. Here, inside Nlyte, we can tell you exactly where you are, exactly what you're consuming, and exactly how you're connected to everything. So this enables you to do real detailed capacity management at a very consumption-based level. Here, this will do capacity management on the what have I got. Here, what have I got and what is it using and how does it relate. So in here, what do I actually have? And in here, what do I actually have and what am I going to have? So that's the other piece. So we do the capacity management in the detail at that level, but we also do it in the and what am I going to be in the future? What am I going to consume if I move or add new devices? And if I remove devices, what will I free up? So this is real detailed capacity management around physical constraints and environmental constraints. This is high level capacity by numbers. How many of these things have I got? What is the rate of growth of these things? That kind of level of capacity management. Combined, it's quite clear. You extend this to give you this by having it all unified. This is correct, the data in here is correct, everything's tied together, and then you have complete end-to-end capacity management. This is the big piece that has always been missing from this. This is why you hear those stories of why it failed, why it didn't work, because it's only seeing through these eyes. This way, it sees through everybody that's making a change. The guy who installs the cable, well, if the box isn't there inside here to tell him where to plug the cable in, there's a problem, so he's going to fix it. The guy who installs the box, if the box isn't here and it says it's going to go into this rack, he's going to fix the problem. If the guy does the audit and he's going around and he's checking the cabinets and he's looking at all the racks and he's looking at all the spaces and it doesn't look correct in there, he's going to fix the problem. So there's many different people and processes making change in here to make sure this thing is correct, because they're dependent on it to show, you know, when I install something, can I install something? They ask these questions here because it's a big what if modelling tool. This is rich and true that extends this down into that model and vice versa, which now means this is not just these assets by type, it is these assets by type, by location, by capacity, so it completes it. That's the big benefit. If anyone asks, you know, if you're sitting with a customer and they say, why should I? Remind them of the gaps. This has gaps. It doesn't do capacity management down to consumption, just does capacity management down to numbers. This is consumption of capacity. This is the piece they're worried about. You know, can I fit all these servers in? Will I be able to get all this power? Can I extend? Can I grow? Can I take on this new project? This is what we answer, and it's this that feeds this. Cool? Cool. So I want to talk a little bit about the data mapping and the differences between how the two systems, CMDB, sees CIs and the relationships, and how Nlyte sees assets and the relationships and the consumption of capacity. We talked a little bit about capacity, but I want to go into the details now. I know there's a hell of a lot on this diagram here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to work from the top, I'm going to work down through it and explain what we're looking at. So first bit is this central piece. What we're looking at here is we've got a CMDB and we've got a configuration item. Now, configuration item will have things like model, type, serial number, and it's going to have some metadata and some information that it knows about that CI, right? Nlyte, in turn, will have some other information. It will know the power, it will know the space, it will know this particular CI is this big, and is this shape, and is this type, and consumes this amount of space, this amount of weight. It will know about that particular CI. So it can enrich a central piece of information. So it can pass information to CMDB to fill the gaps on a particular CI, and it can take information from the CMDB to fill the gaps on a particular asset. So you now have a centralized, rich understanding of an object or an asset, or a CI, it depends which way you want to look at it. But you have a detailed understanding of a record, in a sense. So that's great, we've now got this wonderful record. So CMDB sees it like this. CMDB will suddenly know, when it gets information from itself and from us, it will have an enriched record. That enriched record will say, I have a location for this CI, so it'll know where it is in the world. It will look at it and it'll go, okay, this CI is inside this room, so it builds this kind of relationship. Location, room, cab, potentially, it's in this cab, it's inside this chassis, and it's this chassis that has this blade sitting inside it. It will know things like the model, the type, the serial number, the power, the size of it, the size of the blade, the type of blade, and it will know the size of the chassis, so the chassis lump. So it'll know this, and it'll have a this is connected to this is connected to this is connected to this, and that's it, that's what it will have. That's great, that gives you, from a capacity point of view, from a capacity management, how many of these have I got? How many of these have I got inside this? How many of these chassis, or blades, sorry, how many blades have I got inside this chassis? How many chassis have I got? How many chassis have I got sitting inside cabinets? How many cabinets have I got? How many cabinets have I got sitting inside this room? How many chassis have I got in this room? How many blades have I got in this room? Capacity information like that. What am I growing at? How many of these are coming? You know, what's happening? So it'll give you the what have I got and how does it kind of relate to each other. Fantastic. That's what it's designed to do. So what's Nlyte? Nlyte's model is different. And why is it different? Because what it does is it does very similar, has the location. It says I have this room, this outer bound area, has this room that has this cabinet. The difference between this model and this model is, it says I have this room that has, and this area here is where we're focusing, and it has this capacity. The capacity being, I can get this many of these cabinets in this room. These cabinets are in this location within this room. So not only do I have the how many can I get in here, it's where are they? And where are they inside this room, inside this environment? So I get capacity, and I get detailed locations, right? And when I get capacity, we're looking at not how many have I got, how many more can I get in? So what's my overall capacity for something? How many am I consuming, and how many could I consume? How many things can I get in? So that's at this level. Take that down, same again, to the cabinet. What can I get? Well, I can get capacity, I can get locations, I can get locations at a more detailed level now. I can get locations to U positions. I can get cooling. I can get weight. I can start bringing back even more capacity information. So here, how many things, going back to the CMDB, how many chassis have I got, how many blades have I got? Here, how many rooms have I got, how many cabinets have I got, how many cabinets could I get inside this room? Where are all the cabinets inside this room? When I get down to the cabinet itself, you know, cabs, locations, U positions, how many of my overall U's that do I have inside my environment? Well, I could answer that question here, but how many U's am I consuming and at what rate? Are they actually being consumed? Are they planning to be consumed? How much cooling have I got inside this cabinet? How much weight can this cabinet take? How much weight is this cabinet currently doing? And by what? So it's very detailed. So we've got this bit here. So now we come to the chassis. Go down to the chassis, we can do exactly the same. We can do the, what's it called, the locations, space, the consumption of weight, power, cooling. Again, you can start building off and you start getting more capacity management. And it's this nesting or this relationship of this lower devices. We go right down to the blade now. So we do blade. And we go from there to there. So we say this blade is consuming this slot inside this chassis. This chassis has this amount of slots, but this blade is actually sitting in this exact slot, which means I have these other slots free and exactly these other slots free. So it's very detailed. And I am drawing this amount of power and this amount of weight and this amount of capacity within this area inside this chassis. And it's this nesting and this relationship that's different than this, similar but different, in that it extends this very relationship logical view, if you like, down into this very detailed capacity view. So now I can ask questions slightly different than I can answer here. So I can say, well, how many cabinets have I got inside my environment? Brilliant. You've got 50 cabinets. How many cabinets could I get inside my environment? I think 1,000 cabinets. Where would those cabinets go? How could I plan those cabinets out? What would that mean if I did that to my existing cabinets? These are the kind of capacity information you can answer just through this model. When I take into account the cabinets, the things inside the cabinets, here I can answer how many cabs have I got, how many things have I got, you know, how many things are sitting inside each cabinet. Here I can answer where exactly are they sitting within inside these cabinets, how do they consume space, how do they consume power, what's the effect of these things inside these cabinets on the cabinets, that's the effect on this room. So it's this nesting and this relationship that's different around DCI and around Nlyte, and why you link the two together. And now, if you take this to this, that's what gives you that whole picture. What a lot of people will think, and when IT will think about this, they will say, well, I can just go into the CMDB and I could just enrich it through discovery or some other source and just put in real-time power, put in the actual space of this object. That's great. You will get a detailed object, which is what you will get through Nlyte and the integration. What you will not get is this, that this is consuming from this. This object sits within inside this object, and when it sits inside here, it consumes capacity. That consumption of capacity automatically has an effect on this object, the cabinet. That automatically has an effect on the room, because my overall capacity is now being used by one of these lower level assets. And it's that relationship, and that's the why you bother, that's the benefit. Cool?
Yeah, that's kind of what I was...
This is why I always go, you hit it bang on the nail with the Russian doll story. That's why I always say it's Russian dolls. Whenever I'm sitting with a customer, like you're videoing, yeah, I always say it's Russian dolls, right?
So essentially you're taking what you drew there originally as CAD room, and you're just repurposing room to have another layer.
Yeah, and that's exactly how Nlyte does it.
Yeah.
So Nlyte does it like this. So Nlyte will say, you know, world, city, building, room, location, whatever, and it'll take it all the way down. When it gets to a room, it can go to a sub-location, which is a pod or an area, right? And inside that, you're putting in a cabinet. And this is why it comes down to the Russian doll story, because it really is like a Russian doll. You've got the tiddly little one in the middle, right, which is the end result of everything nested together. And it's that little one, as you put the little doll inside the next doll, you've taken capacity from it. You've taken the space you were allowed, your capacity. And it's that that's the capacity management. When people say, oh, what is capacity management? Oh, how do you capacity manage your data center? There'll be different arguments from different areas. So if you go facilities, it will be power. It's how much power can I give you? How much power are you using? What rate are you using it at? Right? It's good. Then it'll be data center management people. They'll be saying, well, it's the amount of footprint I've got. It's the amount of U I'm using. It's the amount of devices coming in. Great. Then I look at the logical stuff, and it's the amount of CPUs, it's the amount of memory, it's the amount of applications I can run. All capacity management. We focus on that detail of capacity management, that consumption of physical things on other things. So when you put that little doll inside the other doll, that blade inside that chassis, it has a knock-on effect. You've used some space and capacity of this chassis. When you put that chassis in the cabinet, you've put that doll in the next doll, you've used what that can take, and then so on and so on. But Nlyte takes that into account and starts radiating that up through the records. And it's just nested, and like you was just saying, you know, from room to pod, that's what it gives you.
I wonder if we need to capture that.
There we go. Space, power. Networks. So, major, are you recording yet? Cool. Major metrics for capacity management inside the data center. So, capacity management, right? So, there's capacity management done in many different ways, right? So there's, and the easiest way to equate this is budgetary, right? So if you go to budget and you get to the end of the year and you're coming up and you need to do your budget for the next year, but you can't be asked to go and figure out what you spent, what you did, what benefits you got from it. You can do a wet finger budget, right? Which is generally what a lot of people do when they can't be asked. And that is, well, I spent $1 million last year, and we're obviously growing as a business by 20% or whatever percent. So I'll just add that percentage on what I needed last year and what I need next year. So I wanted 1 million this year, so next year I'm going to want 1.2 or whatever. And that's very, very high level, right? That's capacity management, that basic wet finger capacity management. Then there's a next level of capacity management, which is generally what people do inside the data center to a point, which is how much space am I using? So space, right, generally can be going up, could be going down if they're doing a virtualization. Power will definitely be going up whether they're doing a virtualization or if they're doing a consolidation, because they'll be using more kit. So power will go up. Cooling, when power goes up, cooling generally follows it on the same line. So cooling will go up. Networks, when I add more servers, or even if I add more virtual servers, I'm going to be ending up using more networks. So that will go through. and networks will go up. So these things all move up, right? All move up. Servers potentially move down on the physical side of things, but these ones will generally go up, right? Now, this is what have I got? So what am I consuming each month? It's storing and it's storing and it's showing me, yeah, this is what you're doing. Trend, that's what am I doing? So you can do analysis off of that. You can say, well, you know, if we carry on at this rate, and then over the last few months, we've gone by 25% or 30%, similar to the budget question. I can say, well, you know, we're using this amount of capacity over this period of time. If we carry on, we're going to need X amount of capacity. That's one way of doing capacity management. The other way of doing capacity management is draw lines off of these. So you can go, well, line, office space, if we go like that, well, at this point in time, we can only get this much space, and we're using this amount of space at this trend on our past of what we've done in the past. We're going to need about X amount of space. And that means we will run out of space at this point in time, so time. And I can do exactly the same on power. I can say, right, well, if I carry on with the power, and I draw a line off of that, okay, cool. Time on power. So space, I'm going to run out on this date. Power, I'm going to run out on this date. And if I go with cooling, and I do the same again, and I draw a line across on cooling on the trend line, and I go, oh, cool. Cooling, probably going to run out before the power. And then if I go with the networks, maybe networks is over here somewhere, I don't know. Trending. Networks, cool. So trending is looking backwards, has an algorithm, works out a trend line, and kind of says you're going to end at this point. Nlyte's operational dashboard will show you this. It will look at what you've got, and it will look at where you're going, and it will say, right, you're using this amount of capacity. From here, you can start setting up your margins, your red, amber, or green, and it will show you that. But this will give you where you know, based on what you're currently doing, this is where you're going to end up. If you take these dates, this is when you're going to run out. And there'll be one critical element in here that you're going to run out of first. You're either going to run out of power first, you're either going to run out of networks first, you're going to run out of space first. So there's some things you can do. If you're running a data center, there's some things you can do. You can look at this kind of information, you can say, okay, cool. Space, not much I can do about it other than start knocking down walls and building offices in the data centers. It's a good one. Another one is you could look at power, but you might not be able to get any more power, so you start looking, well, knock down office rooms, and I start reclaiming their power, and I start bringing that in. So there's some ways you can start getting around it. Networks, well, I could always go and buy more switches, and I can lay more networking, as long as I've got space to put the switches in the networking. So I can answer that. Cooling, same again. As long as I can get more water and I can get more cooling units, I can start doing it. And that's the game around capacity management. So this is good capacity management based on trending off of what you've got. So what does Nlyte do on top of this? So Nlyte provides all this data for you to do this analysis. Nlyte gives you one other thing that this doesn't. Nlyte enables you to do what if capacity management using Predict to say, well, we're not going to look back in time. We're going to look at what, we're going to ask IT, what are you going to do next? What do you think you're going to do for just this one next quarter? Don't need to know the whole year. So what are you going to buy next quarter? So they're going to turn around and IT can say to you, well, we think, and they must know this, they will know these type questions. We think we are going to be implementing X. Or we think we're going to be going for a virtualization project and ripping out all of this stuff and consolidating it into these boxes. And in Predict, that's what you do. You build inside Predict, these devices are going to be coming in into this environment that will have this space, this capacity, this network impact. And if you get inside Predict for that quarter, you get a no for anything on space, power, cooling, and network within that environment, you can't do that predictive project. And you won't be able to get that answer, that no, from trending. Trending will give you a, you know, if you carry on at this rate. It won't say, if you suddenly do all of this, this is what the actual impact will be. And that's where Predict kicks in. So this does have an advantage. This does give you a little bit better than the earlier, you know, well, we did this last year, well, let's just add 10%. This gives you, you've been doing this over a period of time, you're roughly going to be around here projecting your future. Predict with this and predict saying this is exactly what you think you're going to be doing, this is exactly what you're going to have an impact on. It's those two that really help with capacity management. And that is really the area around capacity management that seems to get lost around when people are talking about the different ways of capacity management. Cool.